Tonight's first order of business: when well-intentioned advice misfires. There isn't really any doubt that young people today, almost regardless of their education, face a tougher job market than any cohort in recent memory, and many of them find themselves living with their parents again after university or college. So the question is, for the group that has that parental support, are there things they can do now that might help them get a job in a few years, even things that might not pay? To some, that advice is not only unobjectionable, but obvious. To others, apparently outrageous. Welcome to The Exchange. Comments from our central banker set tongues wagging on social media. Stephen Poloz triggered a firestorm online when he advised unemployed youth to do this.
Volunteer to do something which is at least somewhere related to your expertise set, so it is clear that you are gaining some learning experience during that period.
That's not all he said. Speaking to an audience in Toronto Monday, Poloz told discouraged young job seekers, if your parents are letting you live in the basement, you might as well go out and do something for free. The reaction has been swift and polarized. Many people focused on the word free, taking that to imply Poloz supports unpaid work. The Canadian Intern Association described Poloz's comments as extremely problematic. Ivey Business School economist Mike Moffat argued unpaid internships are a non-option for low-income persons. Toronto Labour lawyer Andrew Langille said the remarks were incredibly tone-deaf and even dangerous. The issue touched a national nerve earlier this year when one estimate suggested as many as 300,000 young Canadians work as unpaid interns. Poloz's comments aside, the issue of youth unemployment is one that requires attention. According to StatsCan, the jobless rate for those aged 15 to 24 in September was 13.5%, nearly double the overall rate of 6.8%. Poloz says that he does expect that gap to narrow over the next 2 years. The CBC's Peter Armstrong now with his take. I was surprised by the strength of the reaction. I'll be honest. I mean, I was
surprised at the reaction on your Twitter feed.
I tweeted about it because I couldn't. I actually was surprised at how people were taking Poloz to task. My view was he isn't saying anything that surprising. If you can afford it and you have the time, go do something that will look good on your resume.
But he must have known that this would touch a nerve. This is a touchy issue, and it's not like he's just Stephen Poloz, regular schmuck, making a comment about this. He's the governor of the Bank of Canada. His words are constantly parsed, and he's very careful with his words. And, you know, I think he'd like to get this one back and at least massage the language a little bit, because I think his message is probably
Let me disagree with you that he must not have known that it would strike a nerve, because I don't think he
should have known that.
He ought to have known, perhaps. Yeah. I'll take your point that as a central bank governor, he has functions. Some were critical of him, saying, you know, you're the guy that actually plays a role in setting the table to create jobs. So rather than telling us to go work for free, I just think there is a certain reality. And it's a tough one. There's a bunch of young people. We happen to have a big cohort of well-educated Canadians. Canadians got the message, and we've got subsidized education. They went, they got the degrees, they got the college diplomas, and then they get out into the labor force and there are no jobs. And the thing is, what do you do in that scenario?
Well, and it's frustrating, and that's where I think his message is, like the substance of his message is probably good. Go out, and we don't know, he never used the word internship, so we're not saying
no,
go out
and
do
he even did at one point use the word volunteer. So
volunteer. And you know, Mike Moffat, who you mentioned earlier, also said, look, he might be talking about people can go out and blog, they can write about things. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Right. It's just the specific language he used, and in fact, it's that if your parents are letting you live in the basement, you might as well go out and do something for free to put some experience on your CV. I think that's the part that really set, you know, and look, the point is, this guy is not Mark Carney. He's not a guy who's flashy and has a witty answer for everything. He's a real policy wonk.
He is a bit of a wonk.
Sort of what he's known for.
Let me say this, and he is somebody who would understand how things change and evolve. In terms of the economy, things have changed a lot. I mean, when we were 18, I think we'll agree, 18 was a real cutoff. You went out and you kind of got your own place, and you weren't cut off entirely, but it was a serious moment. Yeah. When our parents were 18, they were some of them were already married. They were well on their way. They were working, and then, of course, their grandparents were working at 15, 16. Now, kids really aren't expected to go do any of that stuff until they're mid-20s. So I don't think it's that unreasonable to say they're living in the basement. It's a reality. We don't send our kids to university, and that's the last we see of them. They're coming back.
Some of them
The sooner we face that, the better.
And listen, I think that this is something that's important to sort of get at here, is we're talking about a fairly thin cohort here. The vast majority of young people today do have to just go out and get a job, and they're moving to Fort McMurray, or they're moving to Alberta. They're going to where their jobs are. Whatever it takes to pay the bills, and that's the way it goes. There is this group of people that went and got, you know, I've got a history and literature degree. It was, you know,
How's that working out for you?
I didn't exactly go out turning down jobs at the prospect. I went and worked in forestry for a while. I understand a lot of those people that had to, you know, sort of now say, there isn't work for me, I'm going to go stay at home and figure it out. But it is a thin cohort. We're not talking about a huge number of people.
Well, the other thing that I think really got ignored in his comments, and bear in mind, this wasn't a set bit of remarks. It was the sort of Q&A period in House of Commons committee testimony, so it's pretty informal. And he was actually saying, when people ask me what to do, so he wasn't offering unsolicited advice, but he also said, and this is important, I think, that he sees a kind of a 2-year window. Things are bad now, but he actually does see that things will improve for these young people, and that's really good news. So whether you are working in a Tim Hortons or going to go volunteer, if you believe him, that's the reason to be optimistic.
And if there's one thing to latch onto in his comments, it's the very last line he said, so we have to be patient. And I think it speaks to that.
I think it does speak to that. Interesting, though,
See, we agree.
we kind of agree. Kind of agree. What you do in forestry now? That's all.
Planted trees. I did what every other kid did. Went out west.
I'm glad you got out of the forest.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, Peter.